Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Conversations in Pop Culture, which is sponsored by my very own class, Comic Book Investing 101. If you want to learn how to invest in comic books and invest in them properly and get amazing rates of returns and go through the basics, that's my class. It's on OnlyFans. Again, it's Comic Book Investing 101. I will be putting up the link down below, and if you sign up right now, the first 20 people get 20 free days. So go check it out, and then from there, it's $5 a month for the time being, and in January it's going to be $10. And now, having said all of that, I would like to welcome my guest today, Caanan White, who has worked on several titles, including Uber, Toldus, the Harlem Hell Fighters that Max Brooks wrote,
Yep.
several Zenescope covers, and a variety of other things we're going to talk about. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Thanks for having me, Andrew, man. This is awesome. It's one of them good things, man, that kind of, when you're a recluse by nature, it's good to like break out of that mold, man. And so, I'm one of my goals definitely going out of from 2020 to 21, man, is just exposure. Get out there and people know my work, but a lot of them don't know me. They've never seen me. It's like I had a guy, I think it was years ago. He was like, I walked up to this table at San Diego Comic Con 2018, man, and if anybody knows, you probably heard of Marcus. Him and his friend, they do a book called um, Tuskegee Airs. It's like basically the Tuskegee Airmen, but set in kind of like a sci-fi vibe. And so anyway, I
Yep,
walked
I
up
know
to
who they
the
are.
table. Yeah, and so I walked up to the table. I was like, "What's going on?" And his friend Greg knew me, and he was like, "What's up, man?" And then Marcus was like, "What's up, dude? How you doing?" The typical Comic Con. I don't know you, but hey, trying to be friendly. And then his friend Greg was like, "Dude, this is Caanan, man." He was like, "Oh, my bad, bro." He was like, "No, I didn't think you was real." So I mean, it's cool, man, being able to let people see my face. So it's exciting. So thank you.
Well, I am stoked, and I'll just speak about my entire view on everything that's going on. It is now more than ever important to be doing what this is.
Yeah.
And that's sort of my viewpoint on a lot of this stuff because with cons being closed, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later,
Right.
and we don't know when they're coming back for a variety of
Mhm.
reasons, or what they're going to look like when they come back, or which ones are going to survive, which ones are not going to survive. New
Yeah.
York Comic Con was supposed to happen, last weekend. Zenescope's having their virtual con, releasing all their exclusives tomorrow, which is why we couldn't do it tomorrow because I need to
Yeah.
go buy my stuff, everybody. But
Got you.
but it really is important now more than ever to have these conversations and talk.
Yeah.
And really, it's better. And you're in your house, I'm in mine, and we're doing it through the internet. And there's no
Yep.
excuse anymore not to get out there, everybody. So
Exactly.
on that note, given that people know your work, but there might be some people who don't know your work, and there's a lot to talk about. But I think the best place to start with you is 2006. It's kind
Yeah.
of when you first came to the industry, and at least as a professional. And so,
Yeah.
how did that all come about, and what inspired that? And I think that's the best place to
Well,
start.
I mean, and it's funny because actually it started in 2004. I started with a company by the name of Ape Entertainment, and the guy name is Brent. Brent, good guy, and he kind of gave me my first shot and let me cut my teeth on just doing sequential art because for a while I just did pinups. Most artists they do pinups and posters and all that stuff, and so this was the first time I actually got a chance to work on the book, and so I'm grateful that that first start because it allowed me to get a lot of the little wonky, learning how to lay out pages and story tell out early. And he was generous, man. Even just to give me a shot with one of his properties. And so then I think in 2000, like you said, you mentioned 2006. That was when I connected with a company called Dabble Brothers and Dabble Brothers Pro at the time. They would take novels and basically turn them into graphic novels. So things like at the time they had Selling Songs of Fire and Ice. They had The Wheel of Time. They had shoot the Frankenstein where he was like helping the cops solve a murder. Had that one had Anita Blake like had all these like high end like horror slash fantasy novels, and so Tollus was one the book that I was hired for. And they saw my work on DeviantArt. No, they saw my work actually on penciljack.com. I was like, that lets you the forums. That lets you know how long ago that was. But they saw my work there, and they were like, your work's pretty good, man. I think you'd be good on this. And so they connected me with the creator of the stories behind Dungeons and Dragons. I think it was Monty Cook was his name.
Yeah.
And he used to write the D&D board games. And so Tullus was actually a prequel to the board game that they were launching that year. And so they wanted to create a comic book based off one of the main characters, who was Shiva Callister. Still one of my favorite characters to draw, man. She had this sword that would like eat life energy. It was crazy. And so like when she would use it, it would drain her life energy. But so that was the start, man. Tullus was the first one that I actually did in 2006. Had an opportunity to hang out with the guys and met some of the Marvel creators, because at the time Marvel was kind of branching out from doing your typical stuff, and they started to kind of tap into other properties, just kind of expand their market and everything. And so that's where Dabble Brothers, I think they acquired Dabble Brothers properties and stuff at the time. And so I got a chance to kind of go behind the scenes on that. And so yeah, that's where it all started, man. Started at Chicago Comic Con, Wizworld Chicago.
So let's talk a little bit about this, because there's a lot to unpack. So
Yeah.
you get hired to do the interiors for this. The game is coming out preferably after I think it was 6 issues that you were hired to do. And the game was pretty much done, but they were sort of in the marketing or putting the final touches on it. So what was that like, that you do have some boundaries to play with the game, and it has to fit in, but at the same time there's a lot of stuff that you could add in there, and that the writer can add in there, and then there's original artwork that's not in the game, and it's meant to sort of help sell the game and make it a bigger experience.
Exactly.
For players.
I mean, and that was the beauty of, that's one of the reasons why fantasy is probably my favorite genre, because it allows you to kind of play with a little bit of everything. I want to say there's no rules. You always have your sacred tropes. Your trolls and your the guild. That you always see elves and goblins and ogres and that stuff. But it still allows you to play with so much. And so being able to work on Tollus, we basically had the liberty to play with characters that nobody had seen before. It was a new game. It had elements of the D&D vibe to it. So if you were used to sword and sorcery type stuff, it had that in there. But then it had characters that became more than just a figurine. It was like characters that actually had a story behind them. And so one of the biggest things is Shiva Callister was one of the like main female non-superhero strong characters that were out at that time. And even though it was an indie book, she was still kind of your she cussed with the best of them, outdrank the guys, can wield the sword like a maestro man, but she was still she had her vulnerable spots too. She had a friend that was a ghost, and she would kind of talk to him. He was kind of like her confidant. And yeah, I mean, like I said, it was cool because at the time, Brett Booth actually designed a lot of the stuff, the looks of the characters. And so based on his designs, I was able to kind of take those designs and kind of elaborate on them and just kind of fit them within, my style. And so, yeah, I mean, we had parameters, but for the most part, it was pretty open. It was something new. So it's like, you just have at it. You make sure you have these main characters. I think my favorite was favorite character to draw. I can't remember her name right now, but she was like this 10-foot hag witch that had like built like freaking Lou Ferrigno, dude. It had like this armor and had this massive like sword, and rode this like nightmare horse. I mean, she was crazy. And so, it was cool to draw her and all her armor and everything. So, but yeah, I love fantasy, man. Anytime I get to do that, is always a joy. So,
Yeah, and this was sort of your first slash second interior works.
yeah, like for real is right. Work, yeah.
And so, what was that entire experience like? Because going into interiors and then being young at the game and
Yeah.
meeting deadlines and making sure that it's done correctly. And I don't know if you were inking it also or
Yep.
coloring it at the
I was
same time.
no, I don't think did I ink it? No, I didn't ink it. No, they had somebody else do it, but I did do the pencils, and I think, if I remember correctly, because my pencils kind of, I'm heavy-handed, so because they were dark enough, I think all they had to do was like change the contrast. They didn't really have to find an inker per se. So, but yeah, being your first published work, in the industry at that time where I mean you had all kind of rising stars, I remember meeting meeting so many people in the early days. I don't know, a couple of guys that people may know. He used to go by Cheeks, but he works on uh, he worked on like animated Spider-Man stuff now, and I think I met Alvin Lee when he started, and like all these guys, and so it was like the the ground zero for a lot of stuff, and so knowing that you're like about to be connected and in that type of echelon of people, man, was it was intimidating, man. But it's like when it's something you love to do, um, you kind of push that to the side, man, and you knuckle down and you do what's necessary, man. So and they guided me because they had more experience at the time as far as how comics should go and deadlines, and still working on those deadlines. But but it's they kind of they kind of guided me through it, so it wasn't stressful as it was. Um, it was new. So that was the exciting part about it. So.
And I would imagine in many ways it was a learning
Oh,
experience.
absolutely.
And there was more stuff in play because this company wasn't exactly the most financial stable company.
Yeah.
Marvel came in. There were things that happened in the middle
Yeah.
of this entire position.
Yep.
I think you left, and then but you were still sort of working on the book to some degree. And so we don't have
Yeah.
to get into all the details on all the contractual issues, but
Yeah.
obviously that is a learning experience in of itself of how complicated comics are.
Absolutely.
So you not only just have this interior process of learning and deadlines and working on a book and getting it turned out, because I don't know if this thing was released issue by issue or as a whole graphic
I think it was
novel.
monthly, and then they released it as a trade after the issues were done. So you could buy the trade online or something, and I think, but it was, um, monthly. So yeah, I mean, it was a legitimate mini series run,
So
for Dabble Brothers.
so what was it like when Marvel came in? Because I think Marvel picked up the slack in a lot of ways.
It was cool, man. Honestly, man, you really didn't notice too much of a change, with the exception of probably like the promotional aspect of things. Um, more exposure for their company. I still got some wallpapers. If you ever if you search the Marvel like little index, and you can look up like certain covers and stuff. Some of the Patoma's covers are still in there. They keep all that stuff as like archived and everything. So, it was cool, man. Like I said, when you're younger, I think I was in my early, early to mid 20s. It's all new, man. It's exciting, man. You're like, oh my god, your naming lights stuff shows up on Newsarama, and you're like, oh my god, They didn't have Bleeding Cool at the times, so it was like, you're just like going nuts, man. Like everybody sees your stuff, and they're promoting it, man. But like you said, you learn the do's and don'ts, and at the end of the day, The biggest takeaway was that it's still business, and you see the good, you see the bad, and you see the ugly. And in the midst of that, you have to learn how to learn, get what you need to get, and keep moving. And that's essentially what I did, man. Like I said, I still, you know, probably even to this day, they're good guys. It's just certain ways and certain things you handle. I mean, I've had my mistakes business wise too. So I mean, I understand all that, but the experience of being able to start on something that important was good to have. Most people don't get a chance to kind of get that far that early. And want to drop another nugget. That same year, I think it was that year. Yeah, I think that same year. I actually went to Top Cow's booth at the time, just portfolio reviews and you know two things, if it's okay, with Eric Larson first. I mean, everybody knows how Eric Larson was, and I remember there was this kid that was in front of me. Yeah, I'm telling kid, he's probably the same age as me at the time, but he brought his portfolio line paper and he presented it to Eric. Like notebook paper. He drew. He's like, "Here's my portfolio," and he presented it to Eric Larson. Aaron Larson was like, "It's trash." I was like, "Oh man!" And so it was like 15 seconds, dude, and he was out. And so, I was kind of nervous to present my stuff, and he's like, "Now you're good." He's like, and of course he ripped it up. But he's like, give you a few years, and you'll be, a couple of years, and you'll be ready. And actually, I think that was 2004, so '06 was the day I got my first, gig. So that 2 year gap of training and learning. But even before that, I think that same year I went to Top Cow and I talked to what's his name, Matt Hawkins, and he's like, dude, your work's good. You mind if I show Mark Silvestri? And so let you know how long ago that was. He's playing Ghost Rider for the PlayStation 2. And so that's when they were promoting the movie, man. And he was like, "Hey, I was wondering if you'd be interested in interning at Top Cow." And I turned it down because I had a family. And I was like, I can't move. I can't move to California. At the time, I was like, because you got to intern in the studio, and so I was like, oh man, like I can't. So I had to turn it down. But it was just cool to, to know that you got the attention of somebody on that level that early on, spoke volumes to me, and it, definitely inspired me to push harder. So that was a long, long unpackaged, but yeah.
Well, I know Matt, and Matt has been very nice to me. He's been on my other show, and he's great as an individual, and he's just upset because from 1994 to 1998, he made more money than any other time in his life.
Which the rock star age, man.
but we digress right there.
Days, boy, it was like
that was a very different era in comics, everybody. Clearly, for anybody who knows their comic history, that was called the bubble era, for lack of a better word. And there was a pin that came really in 1999 and 2000.
A pin called reality.
Crashed it down all the way. You're like,
yes, yeah.
But I digress, and let's now talk about 2008 because I think that was when your career started to really upswing, and I think that Tolness really started to kick it off. But I think 2008 really was what ascended you to where you are right now. And let's talk about Avatar Press.
Okay.
So, how did you get connected with Avatar Press? Because they gave you two books that are super important to talk about.
Yes, literally simultaneously. They gave me two. And so, at the time, I think I had just finished something for the previous company. It was like my last hurrah with them, and so I was just kind of like, okay, what I'm gonna do next? Just kind of filling out the water. Putting my work on DeviantArt at the time because DeviantArt started getting traction and started becoming
This was before
defiant.
ArtStation, everybody. Way before ArtStation.
Way before ArtStation, Instagram, all that stuff. DeviantArt was that spot. You know, it was the Twitter, it was the Instagram, it was everything. You know, it's still around. I mean, it's still good to have, I think, a DA because people still check them. Companies still check your DeviantArt and your Facebook stuff. But anyway, yeah, I posted some work there, and I think I submitted, just kind of randomly, blindly submitted to Avatar, and they liked my work. And it's like you do really good realistic, images and things like that. Um, and I didn't know who Avatar was at the time, and so I was like, oh, okay, cool, And so I just knew that they were an indie company, and so then I started researching. I was like, oh wow. I was like, oh, and I think one of the first books I saw was Crossed. I was like, oh god. I was like that was intense. I was like, they do this kind of stuff. But then I think I read one of their books, which was called, it's still probably one of my favorite graphic novels, Black Summer. And it opened my eyes. It did what Watchmen did, but on a whole nother level as far as the superhero genre. I was like, I didn't know superheroes could just obliterate people. It was like the prequel to The Boys. You know what I mean? I mean, I mean, but it was Warren Ellis. So I mean, it was like, that's what he does. And so I was just like, dude, I'm like, this is it was gory, it was crazy. People was drinking. Yeah, there was like, bad relationships and all this stuff in this thing. And I'm just like, are these supposed to be superheroes? I was like, this stuff is amazing. So I was like, okay. So, they were like, okay, we got 2 books we want you to do. We want to know if you be interested in doing, one was Harlem Hell Fighters. That was the first one. And then Uber was the second one, which I knew none of anything about any of them. And so, but they was like, but we want to know if you can do war violence, or are you okay with violence? I was like, yeah. Show people get, cut and shot and stuff. And he was like, no, you don't understand. It was like, I had no idea what Uber was gonna be. And so he was like, you don't understand, like, can you show gore, war gore? I was like, well, what do you mean? And so he's like the heads exploding and brain matter hitting the wall, and I was like, sure. And so I did a little tryout, man. And he was like, that's pretty good, but we want to know if you can go further. And so me, trying to be a purist for what I do, I went home. I was like, okay, what's the one movie I can think of that's pretty graphic, pretty intense like that? And so I went and watched Private Ryan, and that was pretty, that opening scene. You got the guy, he gets his arm blown off, and he's like looking for it. He's like, oh, here's my arm. He's trying to grab it and tucks it under his arm. Keeps going. People getting shot in the head, and so once they broke down, for Uber, he said, imagine if it was Superman without any ramifications. Imagine if Superman hit humans, regular people, with full force punches. That's what Uber is. And then Harlem Hell Fighters was amazing because it was not only was it, I got a chance to work with Max Brooks, which was awesome. And at the time, I felt stupid because I didn't know who Max Brooks was. I was like, okay, Mel Brooks. I was like, oh snap! And then he was like World War Z, and so I went and listened to the audiobook. I was like, dude, what? And so he's like, yeah, I got this story, and I just, Max Brooks, he's real anime. He's like, I got this story, and I really want to, you want to know if, I was really adamant about having a black artist. And I was like, okay, so what's the story about? And it was, I don't know if you ever remember back in the 90s, late or early 90s, a movie called Glory. Yeah, Morgan Freeman and Denzel Washington, a couple other notable actors at the time. And this Harlem Hell Fighters remind me, it was literally almost the same scenario, just hundreds of years later. Talking about at the beginning of World War One, midway through 1930 something, somewhere around there. And so I'm also a history, history lover. I love history and all all that entails. And so working on Harlem Hell Fighters was education um, into being a person of color, what actually happened and what went on that history books didn't tell. They don't cover that. They don't cover the 369th Regiment. They don't cover that. And so he was very, very, um, how to say, respectful. Max was very, very respectful of the material, and as far as the characters within your Harlem Hell Fighters, and yeah, it was a kind of a historical fiction because the main character, I believe his name was Mark, was basically the one to kind of guide the story. But James Francis Ryan, um, well, not, James Francis, uh, and Henry Johnson were real people. And James, James Francis Europe, that was his name. He brought jazz to Europe. It's there because of him. That was his thing. And then, Henry Johnson was the first person to receive the French version of the Purple Heart of any person of color, white, black, or whatever, because of his feats and stuff that he fought when he fought over there. And so, I mean, it was amazing. And so that was the first book. And I was, like I said, was
Let's
working on
talk
that
about
one and
this.
started getting a little behind. So it
Oh,
started
so
coming up on
let's
the
yeah, let's
Uber.
talk about this.
Yeah.
So Uber got punted a little bit behind, which is
Yeah.
perfectly fine because I would imagine that juggling two books doing the interior is
Yeah.
very hard, and very few people can do it by themselves. But I
Yeah.
want to talk about Harlem Hell Fighters because you are black. In case you didn't know, yeah, I want to make that clear here. Like, and so obviously he wanted a black artist, and then this is very much black history. And
Yes.
just so people understand, this unit in World War I, they suffered the most American casualties
Yeah.
of any unit. They also spent, I think, 191 days in the trenches. I don't think that they ever lost a fight, from my
Nope.
understanding. And then they were treated very much how Americans were treated when they came home from Vietnam, with
Yep.
disrespect and a whole bunch of problems. And World War II was very similar, but this is just dealing with World War I. And the Harlem Hell Fighters were also in World War II, but this book
Yeah.
focuses on World War I. And so, what was that like? Because I would imagine that the script that Max gave you was very
Yeah.
descriptive and was accurate and gave you a lot of history. But at the same time, we're dealing with a very historical, well documented, but not taught in history classes. At least I don't remember hearing this in back in high school. But then again, in high school, we're going through 400 years of American history in 36 weeks. So
Right.
there's no way we can get to everything. But at the same time, I don't even know if it was mentioned in passing. And so, as an artist dealing with something so historically rich and groundbreaking, what type of research did you have to do in it? Because I would imagine that a script can only give you so much.
It did, and then and that was the awesomeness about Max was really particular about painting the world they lived in, and so I on my own, even down to you know kitchen utensils. What did that look like in 1940? What did forks and knives and wrenches and screwdrivers and all those things? Because you want to immerse the reader in the world they're reading. You shouldn't see a cell phone in 1943. Stuff like that. So those little things, little historical locations and historical people that showed up. I think Booker T. Washington was in it. I think E.W. Du Bois was in it. Um, um, so many other notable black figures showed up in there. So he allowed me to not only research, but man, but I mean, it was like, you learned about these people, like, so many kills, and like, you mentioned, how well the regiment fought and all that stuff. So it was a history lesson, learning lesson and research all at the same time. And like Max was very thorough as far as what he added to the book. I remember he said he actually had this story back when he was in college. And at the time, they said nobody was willing to touch it. They didn't want to even like, you know, go anywhere with something like that because it was a different time. And so it's amazing though how relevant that story is today, even now, what's been going on and stuff. And so he said one thing that Max said that always stuck with me, and this is totally true. He said the worst thing you can do is take away somebody's history because you take away their identity. Um, I should have known about Harlem Hell Fighters in high school. I didn't. It was never covered. Like you said, black, especially particular black history is only a small portion. It's either, slavery, end of slavery, maybe Jim Crow, and Martin Luther King, and maybe Malcolm X. That's kind of like the scope of it all. But you got Madam C.J. Webb, you got George Washington Carver, you got all these. I always tell my kids when we would talk to them is that Black history goes beyond just slavery. We were inventors, we were poets, we were musicians, we were artists. We
Don't
were
talk in high school and let's
yeah,
talk about Harlem, 1930 Harlem Jazz.
yeah,
That is a lost art, and
yep,
the only reason why I know that is because Thomas Sowell speaks about it, and
yeah,
and unless you actually actively go out, and I don't know, and I don't want to get too political, but obviously there's only so much that can be covered in
yeah,
high school. It's you got
yeah,
36 weeks, and American history is a huge topic, but obviously, I know the Harlem Hell Fighters because I think George Lucas did a movie
mm,
about that, and that was out there, and I remember seeing that movie. But I think most people don't have this idea, and I think that this book also, in many ways, goes beyond comics, where it tells the
yeah,
story very much in a more visual way, and I think it was very receptive
yeah,
because I like to read. I'm a big avid reader, but what I find right now going on is that people don't want to read books anymore. People might listen to something audio, an audiobook, but then when you see a comic book and then you see the two things and then you see it actually has substance,
yeah,
people use both sides of their brain. And so I think that's part of why this book was also massively receptive is that
yep,
a piece of history that like, because in wait a second, there was an all black unit fighting in World War One that we know nothing about, and then there's pictures and we can get a visual component of it. So like
yep,
that's how I viewed this book, very similar to March.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it went. It was the perfect union between the two. Like and you mentioned the script. It was raw. Like he had moments in there, man, that made you uncomfortable. There was a scene I remember where the character Mark and the character Edge went into the city, and for one, they were put their base was placed in one of the most racially charged locations at the time, and so they went into the city and just wanted to see what was going on, and so as they're walking through, you see people, they have like no dogs or N words allowed, uh, blacks only or whites only, all these different things, people giving them mean looks. It's like run into this group of people, group of guys, man, and they just start picking with them. And so one of the things they told the black soldiers was don't engage because any type of fuel to get them to sideline you to not fight they're looking for. People, the individuals that didn't want them in the war in the first place. They're looking for opportunities to keep them out the war, and so it was like that was one of the things they were advised to do. Don't engage, even if they come at you, even if they try to attack you and harm you. Don't engage. And so the Edge and Mark basically went to the city, and they're just kind of hanging out, and so these guys came out and just started beating them up. And one of the things they showed, man, like I guess they used to take quarters and put them in gloves and make it like as a bludgeon weapon. So they just start beating the crap out of Edge, man. Like, and so finally, some of their American soldiers came to their aid. White American soldiers, and helped them out, beat the guys up. And it was like, you guys okay? And they were like, yeah. So they went back to their unit. But that was hard to read, and it was just like, man, to illustrate detailed and as graphic as possible was uncomfortable, but I think it was necessary. And I
And
think Harlem Hell Fighters book is necessary.
and to even talk about this, because Uber is not as emotionally charged as Harlem Hellfighter,
No.
in which that Uber is more fantasy. It's a more what if history. Obviously, we're fighting Nazis in that. This is a much more emotionally charged book, and so
Exactly.
as an artist, obviously everything you do, you care about,
Yeah.
but this is more emotional and obviously is more significant and has more ramifications as far as history goes and getting it right and projecting it and throwing it out there. And so, what
Yep.
was that like as an artist and getting to work on that? And obviously, this is your history, for lack of a
Yeah.
better word. It's American history too, but
Right.
I don't want to just say because I do think that as an American, that is part of American history. But
Yeah.
more your
I
background.
mean,
So what was that like for you? Because obviously this is something special.
I mean, you nailed it. I mean, there was a pride in being able to show these guys' story because nobody knew. I didn't know. Like I said, so there was a pride and you know a carefulness, being careful of how I handled the information that was given because it was going to leave an indelible mark on people when they read it. Um, and it was something to make you think. It was provocative, but at the same time, man, it was enlightening. It made you angry. It made you excited. You cheered for the guys when they made it. You cheered for the ones that that got to the end. You were sad for the ones that died. You were sad how they were treated. So I mean, it was really like an emotional roller coaster. And as an artist, that's one of the things that you pride yourself on, is being able to take a story and make it as defined and as specific as possible to the material, and portray that and reflect that to the reader. And so, though, I was told, like, when I for that script, I would lay out page per page. Sometimes people lay out 4, 5, 6 pages ahead, but for this one I would only lay it out as I read it. And so those shocking moments that I felt when I first read it was the same exact moments that shows up in the artwork. Like, there's a scene where you see, I think it's at the very beginning, and you see this bomb, and it's coming out of the sky, and it looks like a sun, but you realize it's not a sun. It's actually a cannon, and it's firing this rocket, and the rocket follows the rocket, and you're seeing where the rocket goes. It goes to the sky, and it's like from the rocket's perspective. And then all of a sudden you see this trench, and then it gets closer, and you see the French soldiers, and it gets closer and closer, and then there's this guy that's like, oh my God, and then all of a sudden you see it hit, and it's like it vaporizes people, just like it just, so those moments, I think there was another dude where he got hit with a blowtorch, and it literally seared off, like literally the concussion of the blowtorch like blew off this dude's skin, and so it was literally blown off the bone. I mean, so I was like, oh my God, so I captured that moment of shock for me in the artwork. And so don't I mean, there were so many um, connections with that book that I think helped the story be more than just a book you read. It was literally a snapshot into the lives of you know um, those guys, those young guys, and they were, on average, what, 20, 19, and they were young, and and they were, and such as war, and so they were putting scenarios, and so it was awesome, just being a part of something that pivotal. So credit to Max, man, he did an amazing job, and so
And now I want to talk about Uber because I'm not gonna
okay,
lie, I love Uber. I love Uber. I'm
yeah,
halfway through it. I have to get the other volumes. I'm working on it. But what I've read, it is fantastic, and I love
yes,
it. So let me give the pitch on what Uber is. Pretty
okay,
much, Nazi Germany is gotten their ass kicked, and they're legitly days before surrendering and the war being over. Hitler
yep,
figured out how to make superhumans, and then there's a bunch of them, and it's almost a unit that now is coming out, and now they're slowly regaining ground, and the Allied
yep,
forces are in trouble, and so now they're now sort of the Allies are getting pushed back, and
yep,
it's redefining what superhumans are and what fantasy and sci-fi can be, and it's kind of redefining the entire genre. And at the same time, though, there is a spy who might be the answer
yep,
to the Allies, sort of winning and figuring out how to crack this superhuman discussion. And this theory of superhumans in Germany and in World War II, it is not necessarily new, but
right,
this was done in a very different way of
right,
history and analyzing it. And I think, and I might get his name wrong, but I think it's Kieran Gillen
yep, yep,
was the writer, and he was from Marvel, and he was big in Marvel. I mean, he was popular for Young Avengers. So,
yep.
how did this idea come about? How was it pitched to you? How you brought into it? Because this is not emotionally charged. This is just like
No,
bloody and gore, and people are getting killed left and right,
I'll,
and
I'll say I'll
explosion.
say it wasn't emotionally charged on the surface until you actually get into what it was about. And I think one of the characters that kind of let you see that it was more than just a whole bunch of Supermen or Ubermenches, what they call them, destroying regular sized, rare average people is following the story of Sieglund. And she was the one of the battleships. She was one of the battleship Ubers. But that's one of the things that Kieran wanted to. First of all, he wanted to take history and flip it on its head. And so, like you said, it started nearly, right at the end where they're about to invade Berlin, finally bring them down, defeat them, and all of a sudden, rumors starts happening of like something's going on over in Europe, and like they're like, what? Yeah, don't believe it, blah blah. And so there's a scene at the very beginning where it has one of the generals that were over the German army. He's at home with his family eating dinner. He gets a knock on the door, man, and he opens the door, and it's one of the generals he fought with, and he's like, "What are you doing here?" He's like, "Don't you know? Don't you know it's over?" It's like, well, why are you still here? Why are you still in the Nazi regalia? Why are you still in it? He's like, "It's not over." And so then you look out and you see all these shadowed soldiers, and you're like, "What is this?" And so that's when they start telling them, like, we have perfected the perfect soldier. And not only have we perfected it, but we have an army. And we have army, we have armies upon armies upon armies. And so you're like, oh my gosh. And so then you start seeing, they have different levels. They have the Ubermenches, who are the foot soldiers, who are arguably basically an army of Captain Americas, pretty much. Peak human. You know what I mean? So, they can bend metal. They can bench press probably 500, 600, 700 pounds, And these are the foot soldiers. But it didn't stop there. Then you got the battleships. You're like, who are they? Sieglin, Sigmund, Siegfried? Dude, oh my God. I was like, these dudes are like, and they are like Supermen. So they are like, they have this ability, man, where they can warp reality, like with these, I forget what they were called. They're like energy. balls, man, that like the way Kieran described it is like, if it hit metal, it would fold the metal. I mean, just ball it up. If it hit human flesh, he said it was the equivalent of like, um, if you took like hot wax and melted it, and then it just froze. So wherever the distortion ball hit, if it blew across your face, your skin would be stuck like that. Like it's, and that's how it is. It alters everything. And so, um, there's a scene in there where, um, you know, the Allies created their version of a super soldier, Superman character. His name was the HMH Colossus, and Connor was his name. And it was like, salute to Connor because he tried. They were, it was the battle. I think they were in France, and because they were fighting right up under that arch, and, you can see in France. And so Seagull was just doing what she does. There was like, damn, destroy everything. And so she's just, destroying everything, man. And this dude's like, okay, I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready. And so they're like, hold on. He's like, no, I got this. So he's like, phew, super speed. And he comes out and he's just like, bam, just starts wailing on Seagull. He's getting all these licks in. He's like, I got it. He knocks her face like so hard into the dirt that it just like craters the ground. And so he's like, I did it. And she's like, she jumps up, she's like infuriated, like, you dare. And so she basically twists him into a living mass of flesh and bone in the form of a swastika and leaves him there. And I think I found this out maybe a year later, because I actually rarely read the books I finish, just because you're so engaged and you're so it's like but then you read, but you go back and you read and you're like, oh my God, he was still alive. I was like, he was still alive. I thought she killed him when he got changed into that twisted, but he was still alive. I was like, and that just showed like the brutality and the ferocity that Hitler was willing to do to regain that supremacist mindset of superiority. But that's uber on the surface, but you realize that it actually starts to become an arms race. So instead of creating weapons, you create supermen. So then Russia got their version, who was Marie. She was the girl with the sniper girl. She turned out to be like the freaking Phoenix. Japan had theirs, and then eventually, I think where it is now, America has theirs. So, but there's so much that happened in between getting back to the states, man. I mean, they killed Winston Churchill, like they destroyed like all of England, and it was crazy, man. And so that was a wild ride, man. And the way that they broke up Uber, you had different cover exclusives. So you had the main cover, and then you had what was called Blitzkrieg, and the Blitzkrieg covers were like super violent. And I admit, dude, they were actually really fun to draw. like I remember there was a scene where I had Sieglin, and Sieglin was probably my favorite to draw. She was a reluctant soldier. She did her job, but she really didn't want to. And I think she was kind of duped into becoming an Uber because of her husband. So it was like, hey, you do this, we'll make you better and all that stuff. And so she didn't want to be. But I think my all-time favorite was to draw was Siegfried, because he didn't care. Siegfried was like the Joker with Superman's abilities, dude. And so, and when you realize his backstory, I don't want to spoil anything. Hopefully, by this time, I'm sure somebody will probably read it. But Siegfried was actually 16. He was a kid. He was just in this massive body where he could do anything. And so he was like, oh my God, yeah, I can like grab people and it was like, oh, that's so cool. So he was kind of chemically unstable anyway. And so when he became an Uber, it just messed him up even more. And so he was just like, I'll do it. I'll do it. So there's a cover, man, where he's just like stomping this dude. You just see his whole body like, and the sadistic face. There's a one where he's like headbutting through somebody's face. I was just like, dude. And so, but yeah, Uber was as graphic as you can get. But what I to Kieran's credit, it wasn't gore for just the sake of gore. They had books like that. Like I said, Cross was one of those. I mean, Cross is literally just like every profane thing you can think of that can happen in the book happens in Cross. But Uber was like war violence. And like I said, if you had Superman and you took away his love for humanity and you just told him to hit people, fight people, this is what you get. And so Uber was that. And so it made sense to me. The violence, yeah, was over the top, but it made sense. I mean, if Superman hit you, if he hit me full force, what's going to happen? It's like,
there's a
I'm not going to take it.
There's a great scene in Superior Spider-Man where Doc Ock is Spider-Man and he punches a villain.
Yep.
He doesn't realize how many years Peter's been holding back.
Yep.
Him. Yep. And I think that's so relevant. And when we take those barometers off in the Marvel universe and in the DC universe, and then we get a book like Uber,
absolutely,
there you go. You realize that, and the barometers are not there. Or even Superman Red Sun, the barometer isn't there in many ways. It's nice to see that. I think that's one of the appeals of Uber.
Yeah, I think that's why people loved. You mentioned Superman, Superboy Prime. He was that. He was Superman without the connection of a Lois or a care for humanity or anything like that. He was crazy. And he did what he did, and like you mentioned, Spider-Man, Superior Spider-Man. Doc Ock even commented. He was like, "You've been holding back. He's like, this body can do so much more." And so, when you have people behind people with power that don't care about humanity and see people as only weapons, that's really the underlying story of what Uber was about. It was showing just the ugliness and how far humanity can go to try to be the perfect weapon or the perfect this or the perfect that, even to the point of, where you're like, well, who's really wrong? It's like, well, who's really right? Well, from their perspective, I always remember Star Wars, and he was talking to, I think he's talking to Anakin or Padme. I think he's talking to Anakin was talking to Obi-Wan, and he was like, Obi-Wan was like, the Sith are evil. He's like, well, from our understanding, the Jedi are evil. And so it was like, whoa, and you think about, what that character went through, Anakin and his journey to become Vader and how he's manipulated. But some of the stuff that the Sith were talking about were actually right. Some of the stuff the Jedi were talking about were actually right. So it was like, who's, and that's where, Kieran did a good job of kind of leaving that up to the reader. You decide.
Well, on the Star Wars note, this is all Darth Maul's fault.
Anyway.
Because if he didn't kill Qui-Gon Jinn, this probably wouldn't have happened the way it happened. But I digress. That's another debate for another day.
Right. It would have been a whole different direction, man, had Qui-Gon lived. Me and my son talk about it because we're like super Star Wars fans, but we're always like, yeah, man, if Qui-Gon lived, he could have trained Anakin and then he wouldn't have fell and like all these different things. And so, yeah, Darth Maul was definitely the wrench in the plan. And Palpatine, he was sinister anyway. He actually didn't care about Darth Maul, but like you said, that's a whole other story.
It's a different discussion for a different day. Getting back to Uber, though, one of the things that I liked about Uber is that there were a variety of covers with it. Yeah. You did a lot. I think you've done a bunch of wraparounds. There's the Blitzkrieg covers. And then also all these comic shops at least on the first issue and a few other issues, ordered exclusives and ordered a lot of
Yep.
stuff. I know that you worked on some of them and you didn't work on others, but what is that like for you that a bunch of companies actually believe in this comic
Yeah.
and that they don't really care that it's gory because
Yeah.
they know that their fans are going to check it out. And obviously, there's a whole publisher side to that and a business side to that.
Yeah.
But obviously, it goes back to when a book is doing really well at DC and it sells 400,000 copies and a book only sold 30,000. That 400,000 copy book that is clearly making money can help prolong another title. And so
Yeah.
when all these covers are being ordered and it's essentially being licensed out in many ways, which is how all that works. And there's a whole
Right.
theory. The basic scenario is that a comic shop has to pay a fee to have that cover exclusive for their shop as the end story.
Right.
So what is that like knowing that comic shops and a variety of people believe in the work you're doing, the work that Kieran was doing, and everything that was going on?
Well, it was awesome, man. Like I said, I mean, one of the things I always, still to this day, kind of is surreal is when you see the finished product. You know, you see it on the shelf. You know, and it's funny when people don't know you did it. You know, you live in the town that they're buying the book, and you're like, I remember I told a guy, I was like, yeah, man, I drew that. He was like, what? And he was like, this is your work? I was like, yeah. He was like, dude. It's like, so I mean, it's cool, man, to know that you know, like Avatar was. I'm not sure if they still do it now, but they were good for doing variants, man. And, yeah, I think they would have three covers per comic. Like it was three covers per issue. So you had the standard, then you had a Blitzkrieg, and then I think they would create some other ones. Like they had like a Heroes edition or something, and you know they had some other classic ones that you could get. And so it was cool because as a collector, you know, not that collecting comics and stuff were anywhere near what where it was in the '90s, but still some people like those variants. They like having multiple um, type covers, and when it's a hot commodity, and when they know it's for a limited time, because you know that first story arc was limited. You know, and they was going to be put in trade, but you know, people were snatching it on. They were like, and that's what I've always learned. There's always a fan base for something, and you know, even though it seems like Uber was, you know, this dark horse type book that came out of nowhere. For one, Kieran had crazy fans, like you said, because you mentioned his stuff on Marvel and Journey into Mystery, and you know Loki, and you know the stuff he did with what was it, Phonograph, and then you know he had The Wicked and the Divine, you know all those different other books that he did at the time. Thor, Iron Man, I think he worked on. So I mean he's worked on so many different things, and so working on Uber, you know there was always already a draw for the book for his name alone. And then when people started reading it, again, it was something different. Like nobody had seen that level of intensity and violence coupled with historical moments. Like everybody knows how World War II ended, you know, but then you get to see this alternate universe where it didn't end that way. As a matter of fact, it went in reverse, you know, and it got really, really bad, like really, really fast. And so it was like, oh my gosh. And so, you know, being able to have that, you know, the stores pick up those books, and you know, you see people buying them on the shelf, man, and you know, I mean, there's nothing better. Like I can't imagine how it was in the '90s, you know, when they were picking up X-Men, you know, that Jim Lee did, and you know, they're picking up Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man, and then you know, once they shifted gears to do Image, you know, Wildcats and Youngblood and all these different things. I mean, it was like, you know, so it was like, you know, to know that a comic shop stands by what you do as an artist and a writer, it's rewarding. Um, Now, I know, especially in today's climate, um, variants are frowned upon because if the book doesn't sell, you got all these comics that are just sitting in the shop. and people are like, you keep releasing all these variants and like nobody wants them, so those have kind of scaled back a lot on for companies, unless you crowdfund, you do your own thing, you can have as many variants as you want. But yeah, I mean, it's always cool, man, to see a comic shop be able to carry your work, and and that people have a demand for it and they actually want to see what you've done. Yeah, it means a lot. So.
And to talk about another cool thing with this book, there were two volume ones that sort of came out. There's Uber
Mm,
and Uber Enhanced. And this is the thing
yeah.
that I think, and I'm sure you know more of the details, but the enhanced version was a hardcover book, and
Mm,
I think there was 5,000 copies printed of the hardcover book, and it really
yeah.
limited. And I think it was signed, and then I think there was a 350 print run of that same book that had remarks and was signed also.
Okay. Yep.
And so,
Yeah.
what
I mean,
was that like? Because that's kind of cool. Where obviously there is a huge fan base that wanted it really limited, and also it's
yeah.
kind of cool that Avatar and then I think maybe another company was also involved knew that type of stuff was going to sell, and that people wanted
Yeah.
it. And getting to work on that, and getting to play around and put cool stuff on books, and kind of
I
having
mean,
that push
that's
and
like the
drive.
Christina Caribbean when you've gotten to hardcover status. You know what I mean? It's like it's like, oh my gosh, like it's and to know, of course, like you said, Uber has gone on to be so much more, from the run that I did. I think I did first 11 issues, and then I did, I think, issue 19, maybe 20, I think 22, and something like that. But it's gone on to, to tell the rest of the story. And, now, like you said, you got several volumes of this. And, like you said, the enhanced one, you know, I can say, man, and, that I'm part of that enhanced edition, man. Like that was the first. Yeah, I was the first. I remember the first cover, man, where it's got her holding skulls and she's got skulls behind her. I was issue 0, so people were like, "What is this?" And so it's cool to actually see it get to this point and to know even to this day, you talking about what 2013, that there's still a fan base for it. People still love Uber. I've gotten periodic emails, people like, you going back to it, you gonna be, I was like, no, probably not. But I tell you what, as a if I had done Uber today, man, dude, it'd be a whole nother level, dude. Like legit Marvel status. Like it's learned so much as an artist from then to now. And like I said, now we're digital and everything, so I kind of eat my own stuff. But it's I was always thinking about like, man, yeah, I'd love to just go back and do maybe like even a little short story arc of Uber, just to show, for one, where I've come as an artist, and then two, to revisit those characters again. Because they were, I followed a couple of them into the current stuff, and I think Siegelin is like injured. She's wheelchair bound or something, and her whole face has been scarred. I think Maria did that. Um, so she's kind of out of commission. Sigmund quit. you know, he's part of the Allied forces, if I remember correctly, and I think Siegfried's dead. So it's like, it's and Stephanie's somewhere floating around trying to still make stuff happen. She's the scientist you were talking about. She was the glue to try to get the Allied forces the same Uber crystals, wherever they called, to try to get that same recipe to everybody else. But yeah, a lot has changed. A lot has changed with the story. They've changed the Kieran has changed the entire landscape of the earth in his world of Uber. And yeah, I mean, I always thought it would be interesting to carry that same science and technology into today. How would the world look today? Like, what would Uber of 2020 look like? You know what I mean? It's like with all the, would it be a world of supers? You know what I mean? It's like would everybody have powers? Kind of thing by now. You know, um, how would it, would it be like, I don't know if you remember that TV show on, I think Amazon, Man in High Castle, where like the Nazi regime like took over everything,
Philip
all the
K.
way until
Dick.
like 60s,
Philip K.
70s.
Dick wrote it.
Yeah. It's like would they actually have control over everything? It's like, would you have underground factions? And it's like it'd be interesting to see kind of what Uber looked like today if that same science and technology kept going. If it didn't stop. Um, I mean, you'd have a world of, like I said, of titans, powers and abilities. So it's interesting.
And now I want to table Uber. I want to table all that. And I want to focus on your other side of stuff because you do a lot of cover art.
Yes.
And the company that you do most of your work for is Zenescope.
Yes. Yep.
So how did that relationship happen? Because they may or may not be my favorite company. I will plead the fifth. Tomorrow I'm obviously busy from 1 to 5. I am busy. So Jason, Chris, Ralph, this is for you.
And just I'm trying to think how I got connected with them. It may honestly, Andrew, it could have been random. Like I think I sent. It seems like a lot of it happens like that. And you just kind of send in your work, man, and you get, it's like feelers, and whoever like bites, and you're like, okay, cool. But it's either through him. I did some work for him. And shout out to Josh Burns. He's done a lot of the painted covers.
Yeah.
For Zenescope.
He's on my list.
I don't know if you ever seen him.
He's on my list.
Yep. I actually I went to school with him. I grew up with him. He's from my city. I think he lives in New York now, but we both went to grade school together. And yeah, I mean, I think it was through him. But I think Dave was the guy that I'm connected with through Zenescope, and talked to him. And I think my first cover was, I think, for Sky in the Grimm Fairy Tales. It was a dragon. She had to fight a dragon in armor and something like that. I think that was the very first cover I did, and they liked it. And so, you know, long story short, man, like I've been doing covers ever since. I actually got one to do for this week too. But I love the story, man, because the fantasy and the fairy tale element. I remember watching some of the Zenescope stuff back in the day. Particularly, one I remember is, I think it was Neverland. Like Peter Pan was like this, basically this overlord, that kind of ruled everything.
And then Hook's the good guy.
Yeah, it was like a whole flip flop.
And Tinkerbell is the kidnapper.
Yeah, yep. And so I was like, that's interesting. And so then you start unfolding the whole world of Robin Hood, and then the Three Musketeers, and then Van Helsing was who I like. I think she's probably one of my favorites to draw. Who else? There's so many.
Yeah, you've worked on legitly, I think, almost every character in Zenescope.
I think as far as the female main characters, I had Robin Hood, like I said, did Cinderella, did not Red Riding Hood, but it's the only one I haven't done. But I've done, like I said, I've done Robin Hood. I've done, I think she was like the equivalent of Jasmine from Aladdin.
Yeah.
I've done. Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot. I said Three Musketeers. I've done a lot of them.
So let's talk a little bit about this, because there's a few that I want to talk about. And
okay.
I'm a big Van Helsing fan, and so you got to work on Van Helsing versus Robin Hood, and I think this is an awesome cover, because you mentioned in Harlem Hell Fighters that you drew the bomb slowly coming down from the bomb's perspective, and you have a cover in Zenescope. I think it's the issue 1 where we have Robin Hood shooting her quiver of arrows essentially down.
Oh yeah.
It's an awesome cover, and I love it. I'm going to go on eBay and buy it after we're done here. So clearly, you know where my money's going. But
thank you.
How did that entire cover come together? Because I think that's even the first cover. It's either cover A or cover B in that.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. I always tell Dave, man, like one of the things especially on the latest, I don't know if you've seen some of the latest covers, but I don't like sticking to the standard of what, okay, this is here and then this, 'cause, we always, he always wants us to, wants me to present like two ideas. And so, just concepts for people to mull over and kind of examine. But I'm always want to make sure that I make it dynamic, man, because it's like the standard covers are boring. I mean, you've seen the hero stands, and you got the team shot, and you got all this, that, and the other. But I like to like put people in the midst of the action, man. So that Robin Hood was one of those things. I was like, you know what, I want to try this. It was like really like trial and error. And so having her basically descending from a tether rope of a helicopter, with a reverse flip view, man, and her launching her arrow, man, was like something that I hadn't seen yet. And so, there's a couple. I actually really like drawing Robin Hood. There's one where I think she's in an alley fighting drones.
Yup. Is this the one where we're like she looks war torn, right? For Robin Hood
Not
vigilante.
that one, but it's the one where it's got actually the perspective of the reader. You see their hands, and they're like, "Oh my god!" And so she's like coming down on like one of the robots, killing it in the alley as they're coming up the alley, charging the viewer. She basically attacks one and takes it down before it gets to the reader. With the reader or whoever, the reader, their hands is like from their perspectives, and they're like, "Oh no!" So
So
I always like just changing it up, man. Like there's so many, as you know, there's so many covers. Zenescope does so many different covers, um, and I want my covers to kind of be fresh and unique. Something different, something new, more than just a pinup, man. I try to show dynamic at the same time, still show the character. And like, I think there was I'm trying to think of the one. There was one that was released where it had Helsing, Van Helsing fighting Dracula, and it was like they were on the outside of a ledge or a terrace, and he's busting out of the glass. She's got her crossbows like firing at him while
yeah,
he's
that's League of Monsters. League of
yep,
Monsters issue 5,
yep,
right?
yep. There's
And so
speaking of
it's like she's guns blazing everybody.
yep,
It's crazy where you have her almost looking like she's sort of taking a step back.
yeah,
Dracula's coming, and she's
yeah.
got like both of her guns out and ready to like shoot up.
Well, and you think like that's kind of how it would be if you were on the all of a sudden somebody jumps out at you like, oh crap, it's like you got to jump back, and it's like, okay, I need to create some space, because this dude is lunging at me. So yeah,
So to even talk about that, because a lot of your covers, I would say 90% of your Zenescope covers, definitely capture elements of a scene that's going on. We have the occasional character shots. We have one of those in Robin Hood Outlaw for one of
yeah,
the issues. We got a character at a desk. We have like a few of those with Robin Hood, but I would say the majority of your covers definitely capture more of a story element. Whether that happens in the story or it's close enough that clearly Van Helsing's going up against Dracula. She might
right,
not be going up with taking a step back, guns blazing, but definitely captures an element of that. So, what is
right.
that like for you to understand the book and then capture what's going on and really tell those things? Because I do think it gives a flavor to the reader, and I think that's something that Zenescope captures really well. And obviously, I've interviewed a lot of Zenescope artists at this point.
I mean, credit to that to Dave, man. Like he actually kind of paints the scenario. He's like, yeah, we were thinking about blah 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 blah. It's kind of did, and so there's very little thought as far as what needs to go on in the scene on my end as it is bringing it to fruition. He's like you said, I was like we were thinking about this, this, and this, and then kind of give it to me to kind of like take all those little key points and put them into a cohesive picture. So I usually don't get a script as far as what's going to happen in the issue. he just kind of gives me a breakdown of what he wants the cover to look like, and because he's more or less written it already, or knows how it flows, and so yeah, I mean, I said that's credit to Dave, man. Like he's like, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. I was like, oh, okay, cool, and so if it captures something from the book, it's more likely because that's kind of what he wanted me to do. So yeah, I mean, it's not anything too mystical. It's pretty much his leading and his guiding as far as like what he wants on the covers, and then from there, I just draw it. So.
And then how does he treat your work on Bell and Bell Beast Hunter? Because that's his baby.
Yeah. He likes it, man. Like like the covers that I did were awesome. I think my favorite has to be the Beast behind Bell. She's in like some dilapidated
We're going to talk about that one right now. So I think that cover really captures what that entire comic and Bell, Beast Hunter, and even Bell Oath of Thorns is about. I think that cover really captures it, because we have Bell on the front and we have Beast behind her, and I think it sells it all. And
yeah.
So it's rare that I view that a cover. When I saw that cover and I see that cover, it's like, boom, I get what this is about immediately.
Awesome.
And so what is that like? Because I think a lot of people, when they're going to go look up this cover, I think it was issue 4, I want to say.
Okay. I think it's somewhere around there. Maybe cover B or C. I can't remember. And you do so many after a while.
So I think when people see it, they're like, oh, I get it now. So what is that like? Because I think you obviously love that cover. I think Dave likes that cover. And what is that like?
It was fun, man. Like he like you say, he gave me concepts to do. He gave me references of what he wanted me to use. What the Beast kind of looked like, and I think and from there he was just like kind of make it an ominous situation. She's in some abandoned church looking thing, and and he's basically this nightmarish beast that's coming up behind her. And so I love the fact that he Zenescope takes a lot of the characters that from Disney princesses and all that stuff, and they kind of flip it. And so the Beast is a beast in this scene. I mean, he's evil. He's mean. And I think people can get infected and become beasts, kind of like him. I think later on that happens, because I did a cover where basically Belle was getting swamped by all these different people that were like beasts, and it's kind of like from a up perspective. And I think this got the blood moon in the back, and so they're all coming down on her, man. She's just kind of war torn, a little bit and tattered, and so she's trying to find her way. But yeah, I mean, it was fun to be able to, I always think of the Beast almost like in the mindset of like how you would draw a werewolf, because that's kind of how he felt like that. Like he wasn't just the Beast from the show. He wasn't just this. He was this ferocious creature, man. Like you had to like show his mass, his size. I think of that thick fur. That you see werewolves have, man, and them eyes that just like you see him, man, just like obsidian black, cold red eyes, and so like it was fun to just kind of put all that into one image. Really capturing the fact that Belle didn't, you kind of felt her uncertainty. Like, where is he? And he's like, I see you. Like, he's right there the whole time. And so that was a fun one to do. It was a fun one to do.
And then the last cover I want to talk about, because we've still got some other stuff that I want to cover here that's more recent, is your Shane cover, which I think is your latest cover that is published out right now. And Shang is a mini series, essentially. I think it's 3 issues. And obviously Shang is tied to Robin Hood. Hopefully I'll be winning trivia with some of that knowledge tomorrow on Zenescope's live stream, everybody. No, I'm not paid, but I should be by them. Yeah. But anyhow, what was that like getting to work on Shang? Because that's their latest property, and things are sort of changing with Zenescope a little bit, but Shang's kind of one of the last 2 Raws. before they enter the next era.
And if I remember correctly, that's basically their Mulan, right? That's the type character.
I think their Shang is sort of Mulan mixed up with the person who took care of Robin Hood in
Okay,
Mystic and protected and is sort of like a sorcerer, but is not the Wizard of Oz. Shang's a weird one in their
gotcha.
universe.
And you probably talking about the cover where she's in like her geisha like garb and yeah. So I mean that was he at the time. I don't think they had a definite look for her yet. So he was just kind of like, use some of these references to kind of show. And so I wanted to show her almost like a geisha assassin. Like she's looks like she's this delicate flower, I guess you want to say. But at the same time, man, she's this fierce warrior, which is why she has the bladed spear, in the other hand. It's like, don't get it twisted, man. Like she's not just your little pushover, man. She's a beast, and she can handle her own. So, yeah, I mean that was pretty much. He was like, just kind of make her sexy, but at the same time make her,
A
make her
badass.
look strong, make her look aggressive.
They
So
make her
yeah,
a badass. Is the
yeah, yep, yep, yep. So that's pretty much. I mean, that was pretty much it, man. Like I said, the instructions that Dave gives, man, are very, very basic, and it's just kind of like, that's kind of what I want to see. If you can add that and tweak that, and then I'll sketch something up. And sometimes it's something that he didn't even think about. He's like, "Oh yeah, go with that," So there's a cover that I'm actually working on now where it's got Robin Hood versus Iron Maiden. So, yeah, you'll get to see that pretty soon.
so now to take a step outside of all the cover work, because you've done cover work for Zenescope, you've done cover work for obviously Uber and Thomas and a few other comics. And I am curious because obviously Jason Metcalf was on Monday. Keith Garvey's been on, Senku Manaki's been on, Ebas has been on, David Nakayama's been on. And I'm curious what makes a good cover and what is a cover supposed to do in your world with a comic?
Well, I mean, it's the first impression. I mean, it's the first thing people see. I mean, if which is can be a double-edged sword, as you know, being in comics. You've seen where the cover was amazing, but then you open it up and you're like, oh gosh, like this was not what I expected. So the cover is powerful. It's a cover thing. It gets you to buy a book that may not be good on the inside, but based on the cover alone, you're like, this is amazing. So the cover is crucial. I mean, it's the first impression. And then two, when laying out a cover, man, I mean, a strong cover should draw you in. And if you can tell what's happening, which actually sometimes in some ways makes doing a cover a little bit more engaging and engrossing than just doing storytelling. Interiors. Interiors are work because you're leading the reader along. But a cover, you have to take that entire story and summarize it in one image. And then that's not easy to do. And so, when a good cover should be able to tell what's happening in the book or for that issue at a glance. And the more dynamic the cover, or the more polarizing the cover. I remember, I think it was, and I'm dating myself here, but back in the day, Zero Hour, back when DC was doing Zero Hour, and they released this cover, and it was all white. It just said it was a 0 hour.
I have it. I have that cover legit.
Yeah, dude.
5 feet
like,
away from me.
Oh my gosh! Like that cover was like, this is it. Like the world, it's like it's over. Like after and it summarized everything that Hal Jordan basically recreated the universe, and so it was like that was it. It was the countdown. It kept counting down all the way to 0 hour, and then finally 0 hour hit, and you're like, oh man. Same thing with I think of X-Men right before they went to um, what was it? The alternate universe where Joe Madera took over and um, Wolverine had the nub, with the claws in it. And what was it? The Age of Apocalypse. Right before that happened, man, it was like this big lead up to Onslaught, and you're like, who was Onslaught and all this stuff, and then you always remember when the X-Men, you see the shadowed figure, and they're all standing on the X, and it's all broken up, man, and and Onslaught's silhouette is just like looming over the words, and you're like, oh my God, who is this? And so a cover does multiple things, and when it's a dynamic cover, when it's a power cover, sometimes, like I said, with the 0 Hour, sometimes it's just shock value. Like Death of Superman, the bloody S. You're like, oh no, and to me that's probably the reference for anybody who writes Superman should always refer to that series. Because if you ever want to see how Superman's supposed to be and how his character is supposed to be and how his that entire series was like Superman to perfection. Just like Frank Miller's Batman Return. You wanna see, a grizzled old Batman and how he would look, many years later. Like that story, The Dark Knight Returns, changed comics. It changed the graphic novels. Death of Superman. People didn't think superheroes could die. Even though they brought him back, but the manner in which he died was so heroic. It was so Superman, and so that bloody S on the cover said everything. It's like, oh man. So I mean, they're important, man. Like I've seen bad covers, covers that were so cluttered with all kind of stuff. You're like, I don't know what's going on. Sometimes it's simple. Less is best.
And to even talk about this even further, Zenescope typically, and especially with a lot of your covers, it's one of four main covers, let
Yes.
alone all the variants. And so
Yep.
there is a lot of choice to
Yep.
hit for particular audiences where somebody might not like a certain style or they
Right.
might like your style and not somebody else's. And so as an artist, even being part of that and giving readers choice in many ways, because it's all the same book inside. It's just
Yeah.
what you want on the front. There's some people might like character shots. Some people might want, Van Helsing gun blazing going at
Yeah.
it. So, how do you feel that Zenescope does hire, four artists or four teams, I should say, to go out there and do it, and then now there's a choice for readers to have because other companies don't give them a choice at the moment.
Yeah. I think it's good, man. I think it brings variety and it keeps it fresh. Because I mean, that's the thing with when you have an artist and when you're a younger artist, sometimes you don't understand why they would bring in somebody else, but it keeps things. I kind of relate it to. I'm a sport. I love sports too, particularly football. And so sometimes you'll have a coach and he'll bring in another. You'll have two running backs. You have one that's a big guy, and then you have one that's a little guy. And the reason why they do that is because it confuses, the other team on how to block for that guy. You got this big dude coming in, so you prepare to block for this big guy, and all of a sudden, the next play, there's this 5'5" guy coming through there. And you're like, oh wait, we gotta switch it up. So it adds variety. It keeps everything honest. It keeps everything new. It doesn't get boring and mundane. And so, and then as artists, nobody sees the world the same. So having somebody else's, like you said, my covers look totally different from Josh's. Josh's are like immaculately photorealistic paintings that just take your breath away, and it still captures what's in the comic book. I'm more on the illustrator side of things, and it still captures what's in the comic book. So, yeah, I mean, I think they're necessary, man. Variety keeps it fresh, keeps it new, and you don't get bored with the same artists through the entire thing. So,
Yeah, now let's jump out of Zenescope because I think that hits it on the head. Obviously, everybody go on Comics Find, look up all Canaan's covers because they're fantastic. That's all I'm gonna say on that point. Or if you go on Zenescope's website, if they type in your name, they'll probably be able to find a bunch of stuff. Because you just I've done it, and you could legitimately get a bunch of stuff, and then wait till Zenescope has a sale. Every once in a while,
Awesome.
they have like a $2 per issue sale, and
That's awesome.
that's the way how to get covers really cheap, everybody. Or if you're even smarter, you wait till they have a $1 sale, and then you stock up on everything. But
Well, there you
I
go.
digress right there. Yeah, this is the anti-Zenescope part of the presentation here.
Yeah, right.
But going beyond and talking about present day and what's going on, because indie comics are the hottest thing in the comic world right now.
Yes. Yes, there.
And you are involved in a few indie projects, and the first one is Brand by Antonio Bryce. I think
Yep.
the writer on it. And the first one did $78,000 on
Yeah.
Indiegogo, and the second one did 30,000. And
Yeah.
so, and obviously, those are way beyond the original goals that were set.
Right.
So, what is Brand about for those who don't know? And then, how'd you come into it? And then, what's going on with it? Because I know that a lot of cool people are involved in providing variants. And I know
Yeah.
Ethan Van Schreiber has a variant. And I know that Billy Tucci has lended some element to these projects as well.
It's well, actually, I met Antonio back in I think 20, I want to say 16. So, and at the time, he was just kind of had me, doing commission work for him for different characters. I think the first character he commissioned me to do was um was actually David Craven, Dawn, and Morgan, which they're the main characters within the brand's world. David Craven's the main character, who's basically Antonio, just done done in a hero form. Um, and then second one, which was a character by the name of Santana, and he is basically the evil Santa. He's not Krampus. He's actually an evil Santa. And so there's a story behind him and why he's the way he is. But Bran is basically a fantasy love story, and I always make sure I get it right because Antonio's like, man, you didn't do my story. So basically, Bran is a guy who is basically called hunters, and the hunters are there to protect the earth, and so their goal is to ward off evil in any form, fashion, capacity, and they carry these things called requiem. And they're basically the spear that he carries is what his weapon of choice is. And so they defend the world. Now, as a hunter, you are not allowed to get married or have a family or fall in love. He does. Enter Dawn Craven, who is the girl within Brand, um, who's also in that pinup. If you go on the website, the Indiegogo, you'll see her up there. And they actually have a child. And so he's basically trying to balance being a hunter and being a husband and a father while being chased and hunted by evil and good. So it's like he's stuck in the middle, and basically heaven and hell are pretty much trying to figure out what's going on and trying to basically take him down. And so he's juggling all those different things. And while in the process, he has a companion by the name of Penance, and he's a mask that basically is living AI. It's like all the information that, like a living computer. Anything David needs to access, Penance can present that to him, and he also can merge with them and become like another form. Think if any anime fans in there, think Bleach. How they get their hollows and
Yeah.
the swords, and they can become one with their weapons and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean that's basically what Brand is, man. It's a fantasy love story, family story, action. gritty, and it's more of a cerebral story than just your bang blast explosive type things, because Antonio's building the world. So brand one is already out, and on I think you can still buy it on Indiegogo, through like backup sales or whatever. And now the new one is The Way of the Gun, which is just literally a continuation of the first book. Literally picks up right where the first one left off. And so, but yeah, that's what brand is, man. It's an indie crowdfunded Indiegogo book, man. Crowdfunding is the way to go for a lot of stuff, especially if you're an indie creator. Like you said, indie books are hot, man, and crowdfunding is definitely a way to get that book actualized, in a way that um, doesn't come out of pocket too much at the start, but at the same time, get your idea out there, man, where you can, you create a nice platform. I know the model that we used for brand was just create a nice platform on YouTube or Instagram or Twitter, and then from there, once they know that you're about to sell something or create a book, man, they'll back it. And yeah, Indiegogo's been good, man. It's been good.
And then the other book that's also sort of indie is Deathstroke.
Yes, Death's Route is like I said, it's like a Spawn meets Ghost Rider meets Night Wraith type thing, man. It's a different story, man. It's totally different contrast from Brand, man. It's very dark, very gritty. Basically, Death Shroud is the son of death itself, um, and also a human, female, and so he's been given these powers that he doesn't realize he has until a fateful accident happens, and basically the Death Shroud persona manifests, and from there is a wild ride, as he tries to juggle the powers of death and angelic abilities along with being a human. So if you're definitely wanting something a little bit in the vein of Spawn, the story by Chad Larson, Death Shroud is definitely the book. And that's still also on Indiegogo in demand, so you can still pick that up too.
And then to even go outside of this and talk about sort of crowdfunding as a whole, how do you feel? Because crowdfunding in the last 6 months has become much bigger,
Yes.
partially because Diamond shut down for a while and indie books sort of had the opportunity for new content, and then Marvel and DC both got derailed due to COVID. And we're talking a
Yep.
little bit about COVID in a second, but also people like Scott Snyder and Keanu Reeves and Ethan Van Sciver and Jeff Lemire and Charles Soule and Ryan Brown have done very well on Kickstarter. And Todd McFarlane obviously launched his toy that did 5 million, his Spawn toy on Kickstarter. So how
Yep.
do you feel about that, given that you're in the indie space, in the indie crowdfunding space, and you're sort of still new to it in many ways, but how do you feel about it becoming legitimized, but also a lot of mainstream players now entering?
I think, man, it's necessary because um, comics. I look at comics like a factory job in a way that nothing lasts forever. You know what I mean? And so, yes, I believe comics will be around for a long, long time, but it's going to change. The medium and the way it's handled, because you mentioned COVID. A lot of that has dictated a lot of different strategies for people. I think DC completely dropped Diamond, so they're finding other ways to distribute. Um, so it's like it's forcing people to get out of the box, and um, really, it's like it's kind of pushing them. If you're gonna do your stories, if you got stories in your mind that you want to create, now's the time to do it. I think it's awesome how a lot of the pros are going over to do some of these indie books because it's working. I mean, you see, like you said, EVS. You mentioned, you know, um, uh, and I think Billy Tucci did one. Keanu Reeves even getting into the groove. Who else? There's Sean Gordon Murphy. He has one. Zack Snyder. They did good. Him and Tony Daniels, they did amazing on their crowdfund. There's been so many others that have done an amazing job. And like I said, the first brand, it did 70,000. Current doing 30. So I mean, it is definitely an avenue for creators to not have to go through the same days. Like, I got to pitch my stuff to this big company or Image or Dark Horse or Marvel, and then if they say no, I can do it. If they say I can't, then I'm just stuck. No, you don't have to wait for those companies anymore. If you had a story, Andrew, and you wanted somebody to do it, and you had a artist that you found that wanted to illustrate it, and you compensated him well, and he hooked you up well, by all means. I know a few people who have started their comic companies through Kickstarter and Indiegogo. Those are just the two main ones, but you're no longer stuck. And I think that's what I like about it. Like, you don't have to be like, man, I'll never get my comic made. Well, yeah, you can. If you got the right people, you don't have to wait to pitch it to, a CEO at Image. And sometimes, man, you may run into people that see your thing and want to opt it into something. That'd be a good Netflix original or blah, blah, blah. So I think, what's his name? Does an amazing job. The creator of Lady Death always does an amazing job on his campaign.
Brian Coffin?
Yes.
Or Coffin Comics. It's Brian something.
Brian Polito.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he always does good on his campaigns, and he's been crowdfunding before it was popular. So it works. And I think a lot of pros are seeing that not only can they create an idea, but they can maintain creative control. I think Richard Friend is coming out with a book. He's a longtime inker for DC, and has done countless pages for people. But he's an amazing artist. He's got his book coming out soon. There's so many creators, man, that are taking that leap, and I think you'll see more. I think you'll see more people doing that, and I love it because it's not just even the mainstreamers. It's people every day. The average guy or girl coming out with a concept, and it may be zany and wacky to some people, but there's a fan base for it, and Indiegogo allows them to, with basically no capital, crowdfund a book and get some capital to be able to create one of their idea. And so I think it's important, man. I think it's going to become, like I said, I think it's going to become even more relevant, especially now in years to come, where you can't wait for these mainstream companies, and they can only, and that's the thing, they can only say so much, and they can only do so much with a Batman or a Superman. They can only kill them so many times. They can only resurrect them so many times. They can only send them into space so many times. You can have so many story arcs. You can only have so many invasions before it starts to become repetitive. But that's the beauty of Indie and Indiegogo and Kickstarter. Not all the stories have been told. I think of like Invincible. No, he doesn't have original powers. No, he didn't have original, abilities. But the story behind who Invincible was is what made Kirkman so popular. Same thing with the Walking Dead series. Walking Dead, it was the zombies, but it was more than that once you realize it was actually about the people that dealt with what was going on during the zombie apocalypse. The zombies were actually a backdrop. And so nobody had done that before. And so knowing that, like Brand and, some of the Cyberfrog, who was, really become a collecting property on Indiegogo. You mentioned, Billy Tucci, Um, I think some Graveyard Shift is another one that was really popular. Um, Zack Snyder and Tony Daniels. I can't remember the name of that one, but Sean Murphy's story. Like all these stories, man. There's so many stories to tell. I got stories I want to do. I wouldn't mind crowdfunding, but there's more really to what you're able to do, and I think when people see what you offer, they back it. They love it. They back it. And now the tricky part is always the fulfillment. You want to make sure you come through. What you promise. And there's always hiccups, and we've run into hiccups even with brand when it was coming out. So, but as long as you communicate with the backers and stuff, I think it's worth it. Like I said, I haven't particularly ran a campaign myself, but just talking with Antonio and what he went through, and refunds and all all that stuff, man. It's like it's real. You're your own publisher. You're your own distributor. You're your own PR guy. You're everything. You are your Image Comics, and so it's work. But I think the end result, when you realize that this is your story, this is something you created, and it's in the hands of the people, man, is priceless. So,
And to even go further off of that, I want to touch upon this briefly. And I do want your opinion on COVID and comics, because I think Kickstarter has grown because of it. Obviously, without cons, people need a way to distribute what they want to do. This is the story. This is the first time indies ever gotten a jump on, the
right.
mainstream. And so I'm just curious how you feel about all of this, and where it's going and what's going to happen with cons. Because I don't know how many cons you do a year, but obviously I know a lot of artists are hurting due to
Yeah.
commissions at cons, or selling at cons, or getting in front of fans at cons. Not to
Yeah.
mention that nobody knows when this is going to come back, what's going to survive, how it's going to survive, and also
Yeah.
what people are scared of. And I think it's reasonable, is that there's going to be Art Valley is going to be cut either in half or by 25%, because there needs to be
Yeah.
more space.
I mean, it's one of those things, man, where um, I personally don't go to a lot of conventions. I think my last one I went to was in 2018. That was the first time going to Comic Con, and that was because we were promoting an indie book, Son of Shaolin. But it it causes a lot of creatives to think differently. It's almost like having your eggs in one basket. You can't. Um, Even though Comic Con was a lot, it's just like I said, working at a factory job. You working at a factory job for 20 years, and all of a sudden the factory closes. If you didn't have anything backed up, what are you gonna do? It's like, oh man, well, you're unemployed. So it's like I think COVID has, and like I said, I'm always optimistic and think the positive. Yes, it has hurt a lot of people going to conventions and their income, because a lot of people would sell product at these conventions, but it's also caused them to be creative even more. um, get your stories out there, generate a fan base. A lot of them have gone to YouTube. They're starting to, a lot of them are doing teaching classes online. A lot of them are, like I said, pushing their Instagram, and you know branching out into other areas of art. So it's a catch 22. Yes, it's negative because, like I said, nobody knows when the convention is going to open up, and if they open up, I don't think they'll be in the capacity that they were. Um, they may actually end up spreading them out over a week. You know what I'm saying? Like, a few hundred people every day, kind of thing. Because you don't want all those people in one room, especially with the spike of COVID. It's going, especially in the US, it's rising, which is like, dang, I actually had my uncle's father passed away last week. as of COVID, as a result of COVID. So I mean, it's not something that you just say, you go around with,
Do,
without, you still have to do the
do
precautionary
you
stuff.
feel that also there's going to be issues with fans not wanting to come due to confidence issues? Because that to me seems the biggest hurdle versus even even like talent and space issues is that because I'm not comfortable going to a con right
I don't
now.
think yeah, I mean, so, and that's the thing. I don't think it's necessarily the fans because I think the fans are like, I'll bite the bullet if I can just shake, Sean Murphy's hand or Mark, Mark Brooks or whatever. But I don't think the facilities will let them. You know what I mean? I don't think they're gonna let the fans get that, that type of interaction. You imagine you going to a convention, man, and everybody's behind glass. Yeah, that costs money and stuff. To set up, that six
And
foot barrier.
also it's going to be really upsetting to a lot of fans because
Yeah,
when you go
because
to
you can't get to them.
even if you hand them your book and there's like a little sliding thing through the glass, it's now become not personal, and you're spending
Yeah,
$90 for a ticket. It's
yep,
like, I want to be able to have some human interaction. Otherwise, I would go and submit it to CGC and have a private signing instead. If I want
absolutely.
to book,
Or just watch an online convention. Yeah. I mean, like, why do I need to be there if it's going to be this barrier between us? And so I think that's what a lot. It's the same scenario, man, with movie theaters. People like, I like streaming at home, man, but at the same time, it takes away the movie experience, like being able to go to, what you call it, um,
an IMAX.
IMAX. Yeah, IMAX. Yeah,
Getting the IMAX theater, overpriced popcorn, your soda
right.
filled with ice for $30.
Absolutely.
Candy that's charged like $900 for a
Yeah,
piece of
right,
candy.
right.
It's all part of the experience,
Outrageous.
everybody.
But that's the whole movie experience, man. I mean, people miss that. So I get it. So I mean, it's bottom line, man. I mean, COVID has changed the world. It has. And I think it's changed it permanently. And so I think it's one of those things where people are now, because that's the nature of humanity. We're adapting and adjusting to things. Um, and the conventions are the same. Like I said, 2021 is going to be very interesting. I don't know what's gonna, it's like I don't know how they're going to handle that stuff. There was someone I wanted to go to, man. It's like, but I can see them. Like I said, I can see them spreading it out over a series of days instead of just three, but making it small numbers. But at the same time, man, it's like still, say you got several infected people who don't even know they are rubbing shoulders with people that aren't.
It's going to be like that, in which that's
Exactly.
con crud.
Exactly.
Con crud is a real thing, and it's always existed.
Yeah.
And that's when you hear stories about people who
Yeah.
are sick, or they might have the flu, or they might have something, and then all of a sudden 500 people at a
Yep.
20,000 person con all get the flu, and
Yeah.
that's how it spreads, or even more. And there's been situations where everybody at a con, or
Yeah.
25% of the people at a con have gotten it, and 25% of 20,000 people, if if 5,000 people got the flu at a con, it's not going to
Yeah.
kill you for the most part if it's the flu. But at the same time, imagine that with COVID, which is a highly infectious disease, for
Absolutely.
lack of a better word here, or cold, or fungi, whatever it is, or virus. I'm not exactly sure, but I think the point is made that
Yeah.
COVID has a much higher infection rate than
Yeah.
other things. And so,
And that's what makes it such a dangerous thing because somebody can actually be infected and never actually get sick, but they can still pass it to somebody else who might get sick. So it's like that. It's very much a reality. You're right, Andrew, man. Like I honestly don't know how they're gonna handle. Like I don't. I can't. I mean, until there's some ebb in the numbers of people that are, the cases, and it's rising. It's like Like, I don't know. Like, I mean, this is.
Also,
I, I was
until
reading something on Microsoft, and they said they made working at home the standard now.
until we know even more about this disease, it is
Yeah,
very hard to do it because no matter what side of the aisle you are politically, there has been a horrific job of information being disseminated by everybody, from the government to the media to everybody in between. And
yeah,
it's only created more fear in the circumstance rather than lack of fear. And I think one of the best things San Diego did was canceling earlier rather than
yeah,
latter. I think it's great that New York Comic Con isn't happening or happened, not because I'm anti New York Comic Con, but because it would have been a massive safety risk,
yeah,
especially in New York and especially in places on the coast.
yeah,
That's where it's spiked up. So I think that those have been amazing decisions, painful decisions,
yeah.
but great decisions.
Well, you think how big San Diego Comic Con is? Like, you not only have everyday people there, you have Hollywood. You have actors that show up to that thing.
Same
Promote.
thing in New York, very much
Yeah,
New York too.
yep. So I mean, it was like you said, it was a painful decision, man, but it's necessary. Like right now, like I said, until things change with it, what we're doing, this is the norm. You know, this
I
is
think this is going to be the future.
yeah. I mean, like I said, Microsoft made it basically a standard. You can work from home forever. It's like a permanent thing if you want to. You don't have to report back to the office. You know, so like people were changing their whole procedure manuals and standards and all that stuff, man, to basically accommodate and navigate through this thing. So, I mean, comics, yes, um, it is a crucial time, but honestly, I think more or less the people that are feeling the stretch are the people that are connected to like the mainstream, because honestly, the indie market, it's like, you know, we've been on our own anyway. So it's like, you don't have these conglomerates and stuff like that. You can produce a comic with several people on your team from different parts of the world. You don't have to meet. You don't have to go to so and so to be here. You can just get the stuff through digital means. Transfer the file to them. They'll color it, transfer it to the letter. He'll do his thing, print it off, and then everybody gets their work, gets their comics. So,
And then we're going to table that because that could go on for another hour. But I know you got a hard out sooner rather than later. But I
yeah,
do want to give you an opportunity to promote yourself. Where can
thank you.
people find you on social media? I know you have a website. Where can people pick up your project? Where can people pick up brand? Where can people pick up Deathstroke and anything else you would like to throw out there? Facebook, Instagram, Twitter.
Okay. For the books, Brand, you can check out Brand on Indiegogo. It's in demand. The Way of the Gun is the second story arc to Brand, written by an awesome brother from another mother, Antonio Bryce. Man, he's my dude. And you can also get. I think there's some sort of deal where you can get the original one in digital. Um, and then for Deathstroke, you also can order via Indiegogo. It's also in demand. If you like Spawn, if you like Ghost Rider, kind of a dark gothic vibe, you can definitely get that. It's still available. For me, if you want to follow me, I'm predominantly on Instagram. My Instagram is Caanan02. On Facebook, which I'll post sometimes, but I'm still on there too, is Art of Caanan White. I also have a YouTube channel. It's called the Art Well, I believe, because I changed the name recently. And then I'm trying to think of what else. Twitter, Cap White, Cap_White is me on Twitter. So, but if you want to really follow my art, Instagram is where I have most of everything. And I have a website, but I gotta revamp that, so don't worry about that one. But yeah, most of my stuff is on. Oh, and I have an art station too. Art of Caanan White on Art Station is also, and DeviantArt. So same name.
So there you have it, everybody. Go follow Caanan White. Obviously, you have many options to choose from. Chances are that if you go follow on Instagram, you'll be directed to where you can pick up his art and pick up what he's doing, because I'm assuming you have all your links up there. And it's a pretty good place. I would start at Instagram, and also the website also
Yep.
has a bunch of stuff. And I think your DM Twitter is open as well.
Yes. Yes, it is.
So if anybody has any questions and they want to pick up and purchase art from you or a commission or something, I'm sure they can shoot you a DM on Twitter.
Yep.
And so therefore, clearly, if you have some extra money, everybody, definitely go throw it Caanan White's way.
Right on.
That.
Bring it on.
If you don't, and it's completely understandable, times are tough, one of the things that you can do is you can follow on social media. You know, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, website, ArtStation, DeviantArt, you know, all that stuff is free. And so there's no excuse anymore not to follow somebody. I'm not holding it anymore, and I can't say for anybody else that it's free social media, so go follow. And that's all I can say. And also, as I stated at the beginning, I got my promotion, Comic Book Investing 101 on OnlyFans. 20 free days, you know, pretty cool stuff. There's a bunch of stuff coming out on there, and we go through the basics of comic book investing so that you can actually learn this trade and enter it and have a great time and make some serious money in it if you follow what I teach you from the basics all the way up to the advanced stuff. Every week there's a new module coming out that's anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour of training, and I have at least another 20 to 30 hours before we get into anything advanced. So there's plenty of stuff, and I have no intention of stopping. So you get your 20 free days, and if you don't like it, it's 20 free days, and it doesn't automatically renew. You actually have to manually renew it, so you're not going to be hit with another subcharge. But it's a great class, and the more people that join, obviously, the more I can do with it. So please, if you're interested in making money, and this applies both on the indie level and on the mainstream level, and now is the time to do it because you can get pretty good rate of return, everybody. So Comic Book Investing 101, I'll put a link in the description in this video for everybody to check out. And I think that's a wrap.
Right on.